wanted to do it a couple months ago when I thought it was going to come back. But the story takes place in the 1800s. And the title, October, is the month I was born. And I honestly created a poem when I was younger about a little girl named October. And I was looking at the poem a while ago, and I realized, hey, I can turn this into a story. I changed a few things around, and that's what I did. And in Word Created, October's Betrothed. Betrothed, if you don't know what it is, originally, it's the dictionary actually says is to woo her, to be wooed. And that pretty much, it's a serious commitment, and it's the step right before you get married or engaged. And again, this is in the 1800s. Let me start with the story now. October's Betrothed. It was a kingdom. There lived a king who was getting a little old, but he had two children. One, Prince Jonathan. He was 22 years old. And when he turns 25, he would have been the next king. And his 16-year-old daughter, named October. Now she was independent, at least in those days. Not now, independent women do a lot more. But in those days, she was independent. She wasn't married, and she didn't want to get married unless she really fell in love. And she didn't think she would ever fall in love because of her status. She was independent, she was strong-willed, and she was a little kind-hearted to her servants, who was pretty much a big character in our story. Now, the king, he wanted to see his little girl get married. And society was telling him that she's at the age where she has to walk down the aisle, and he has to, if she doesn't want to get married, he has to sign those papers to get her to get married. But he loved his daughter. So he was like, okay, well, I don't want to pick her husband. He gave it to her brother, Jonathan. It was Jonathan's prerogative to find her a good, suitable man, unmarried, around the same age, but also needed a title. It couldn't be someone off the streets. So he threw a huge party and invited all the eligible bachelors to come and woo his little sister. Now she was polite. She did the whole princess thing, royalty. She danced with all the suitable people. She smiled, she laughed, but her heart wasn't in it. Again, she wanted to find love. And most of those people wanted her because of her position, her status. It's just her status. If her father dies and her brother dies, she would inherit the kingdom, even though her brother's married. He doesn't have an heir, she'll get the kingdom. Now, October danced with everyone, had fun, enjoyed it like a party. But afterwards, she went upstairs. Her brother spoke to a few people. He narrowed down all the candidates to 3. And he went upstairs and talked to October. Now, she was still a little upset with the whole getting married because society makes women get married. And so she was like not paying attention to anything he said. Now, this took about a month of convincing her, and she finally said, if you want me to choose out of the 3, then I'll go on a date with each one, and I'll see. So she agreed, she went on a date, she enjoyed it, and then all of a sudden, she hated all of them. She really, really did not like any of them. They were charming, they were nice to her, they wooed her and everything, but she did not like any of them. And she saw things that in each of them that she didn't want us to see when she got married. So her brother finally decided, you know what, if you don't take one, then I'm going to decide you to one of them. And he signed the paper and got her betrothed to someone that she had to marry. If not, she would pretty much be considered an outcast. Because they were going to sign the papers, they signed it, you're engaged, that's it, you're done. So she decides, you know what, since my brother threatened to do that, he picked someone, she was going to prove that he wasn't a good, eligible person. So she pretended to be a servant. And most people, when they're pretending to be something, they put on masks and stuff. She, not so much. Glasses. And a servant's coat. And covered up. And she was working in the garden, fancy, working, when she sees her betrothed. And he walks in, she accidentally bumps into him, and he backhanded her. She walked away with a bruise on her cheek and went to her brother and said, I can't marry someone who isn't kind to people beneath them. And she showed him her bruise. Her brother ripped up the betrothal agreement and went to talk to him. The guy didn't know it was her, so he thought he was in the clear. When he found out what happened, he went into a crazy fest. She went into hiding. And the one person she took with her was her servant. And her servant has been there for her for years, but she never pictured him as anything but a friend or a servant. And at one point, he asked her to marry him. And she was like, you can't. I'm a princess. If I marry you, I'll be an outcast. I can't marry you because you don't have a title. All of a sudden, he tells her a story about how he is actually a prince. And she's in shock, like what kind of prince would be a servant? And she actually tells him, yes, after he proves that he is a prince. So she pretended to be a servant to get out of a relationship, and he pretended to be a servant because he fell in love with her. And the story goes that she falls in love, she marries him, and her brother is the king. The end.